I am Genevieve Carter, 27 years old, and CEO of my own tech startup in Seattle. For 4 years, I have poured every ounce of my being into developing software that would revolutionize how businesses operate. My family never took me seriously. To them, I was always the baby who played with computers. When Thanksgiving approached, my mother texted that I was not ready to join the family table with their important guests. So I stayed home alone with my laptop. What happened next changed everything. If you have ever been underestimated by your family, drop a comment telling me where you are watching from, and subscribe to join others who turned rejection into triumph. Growing up in the Carter family meant living with constant comparison. Our Tudor-style mansion in the prestigious Broadmoor neighborhood of Seattle housed my father Jackson, a banking executive with old money connections, my mother Eleanor, who built her identity around perfect hostess duties and charity board positions, and my two older siblings, who were the golden children. Allison, 5 years, my senior, followed our father into medicine, becoming the neurosurgeon that made my parents beam with pride at every gathering. Thomas, 3 years older than me, took the legal route, joining a prestigious law firm and quickly making partner. Both had framed diplomas from Ivy League schools prominently displayed in my parents' living room, alongside professional photos in their respective uniforms of success. Then there was me, Genevieve, the unexpected third child. My earliest memories involve sitting alone at the massive dining table, watching my family praise my siblings, while occasionally glancing my way with expressions that ranged from mild disappointment to complete indifference. My father regularly dismissed my interest in computers. I still remember my 12th birthday when I asked for programming books instead of the designer clothes my mother had selected. "You want to play with computers," Jackson scoffed, exchanging knowing glances with my mother. "That is not a real career path, Genevieve. Your brother and sister are building foundations for actual professions." Even when I showed early aptitude teaching myself to code and creating a basic website for my mother's garden club at 14, the accomplishment was treated as a cute hobby. Thomas had just won his first mock trial competition at law school, and my primitive HTML creation barely registered. By high school, I had accepted my position as the family disappointment. I excelled in math and computer science, but these achievements were overshadowed by Allison completing her medical residency and Thomas clerking for a federal judge. Family dinners became exercises in invisibility. I would share news about winning the state technology competition, only to have the conversation immediately pivot to Allison's first solo surgery. Against my parents' wishes, I attended the University of Washington instead of applying to Harvard or Yale. I chose it for their excellent computer science program, but my parents saw it as further proof that I lacked ambition. When I dropped out during junior year to pursue my software idea full-time, the tenuous threads of family approval completely unraveled. "You are throwing your life away," my mother said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "We gave you every advantage, and you choose to waste it playing entrepreneur." My father was more direct. "No daughter of mine drops out of college to tinker with computers in some apartment. You will return to school immediately." But I didn't. Instead, I moved into a tiny apartment with my best friend Diana, who believed in my vision when no one else did. We converted our living room into a makeshift office, sleeping on futons and eating ramen while I coded for 18 hours a day. Diana took odd jobs to keep us afloat while I built my company from scratch. The first 2 years were brutal. My family's prediction of failure seemed increasingly likely as rejection followed rejection. Investors would listen politely to my pitch before declining. My parents would call occasionally, their questions thinly veiling their expectation of surrender. How much longer will this computer phase last? My mother would ask. The Patterson family has a wonderful son who just joined your father's bank. He could help you find a suitable position. Each family gathering became more painful. While my siblings arrived in luxury cars, showcasing new achievements, I would show up in the same outfit trying to explain complex technological concepts to relatives who had already decided I was the family failure. When Thomas made partner at 28, my parents threw an extravagant party. When I secured my first small client that same month, my news received a polite nod before conversation returned to Thomas. The turning point came in my third year of business. I developed a proprietary algorithm that could predict consumer behavior with unprecedented accuracy. A small tech blog featured my work, which caught the attention of James Whitman, a former Google developer looking for his next venture. He became my business partner, bringing both expertise and connections. Suddenly, Neuratech, my company, began gaining traction. We moved from my apartment to a small office space. We hired 3 employees. We landed contracts with mid-sized companies. For the first time, I could pay myself a modest salary. None of this impressed my family. "That is nice, dear," my mother said when I told her about our biggest contract to date. "Did you hear that Allison is being considered for chief of neurosurgery?" It was only when James and I developed our breakthrough product, an AI-driven data analytics platform that could revolutionize how companies make strategic decisions, that the trajectory truly changed. We called it Insight Engine, and early tests showed it outperforming competing software by 300%. Major tech companies began approaching us. What started as curious inquiries turned into serious acquisition talks. By early November, we were in final negotiations with tech giant, one of the biggest names in the industry. The numbers being discussed would make Neuratech one of the largest tech acquisitions of the year. For once, I thought my family would have to acknowledge my success. The deal was set to close the week of Thanksgiving, perfect timing to finally take my place at the family table as an equal. Thanksgiving in the Carter household was not merely a holiday, but an institution. My mother began planning in early October, ordering specialty ingredients from around the country and consulting with her personal chef about menu innovations that would impress without straying too far from tradition. The guest list was curated with surgical precision, always including a careful balance of family members and strategically selected outsiders who would raise the event's prestige. This year, with my company on the verge of a historic deal, I allowed myself to imagine a different Thanksgiving experience. For once, I wouldn't be the family member everyone politely tolerated. I would arrive with news that even my parents could not diminish. "I think this is the year they finally see you," Diana said as she helped me select an outfit for the occasion. We were at Nordstrom, and I was trying on a tailored burgundy dress that projected both success and understated elegance. "I don't need their validation," I replied, though we both knew it wasn't entirely true. "I just want them to stop treating me like I'm still 16 and playing with my computer." Diana gave me a knowing look. "You rehearsed your announcement in the mirror last night. I heard you." I blushed, caught in my contradiction. It had become a nightly ritual as the deal with tech giant progressed. I would stand before my bathroom mirror, practicing how I would casually mention that my little company had just been acquired for a sum that would make even my father pause. "I'll take this one," I told the sales associate, deciding on the burgundy dress. As she rang up the purchase, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Thanksgiving arrangements." The subject line read, already making the event sound like a corporate function rather than a family gathering. The text itself was typical. "Eleanor Carter," a blend of instruction, and subtle criticism. Genevieve, we will begin at 4 o'clock sharp. Please arrive by 3:30 to help Allison with place settings. Thomas is bringing Sophia. Wear something appropriate, not those startup casual clothes you favor. I showed the text to Diana, who rolled her eyes. 4 years running a company, and she still thinks you dress in hoodies and flip-flops. I thought about responding with a photo of my new dress and its $400 price tag, but instead sent a simple confirmation. For once, I wanted to avoid any pre-dinner tensions. This Thanksgiving would be different. The week before the holiday was a whirlwind of final negotiations with tech giant. James and I spent 16-hour days with lawyers reviewing contract terms and making minor adjustments to ensure our technology would be properly implemented after acquisition. The deal was in its final stages, with only signatures remaining. We agreed to sign immediately after the holiday weekend, which would allow me to announce the acquisition as a done deal at Thanksgiving dinner. 3 days before Thanksgiving, I received the first hint that something was amiss. My mother called while I was in a meeting, leaving a voicemail that sounded unusually hesitant. Genevieve, darling, I wanted to discuss Thanksgiving arrangements. Please call me when you get a chance. I returned her call that evening. Eleanor Carter answered on the first ring, her voice carrying the artificial warmth she reserved for uncomfortable conversations. Genevieve, thank you for calling back. I wanted to let you know about a slight change to our guest list this year. Oh, I said immediately, alert to the caution in her tone. Yes, well, your father has invited the Marshalls. Richard Marshall, you know, from Tech Giant. My stomach dropped. Richard Marshall was the executive vice president at Tech Giant, who had been overseeing our acquisition. He was not directly involved in negotiations, but he would certainly know about the deal. And the Petersons will be joining us, Richard and Victoria. He just became CFO at Novatech. Novatech was one of our competitors, a larger company that had tried to acquire us earlier in the year before we declined their undervalued offer. I see, I said slowly. So business people this year? Well, yes. Your father feels it's important to maintain these relationships. You understand. I do, I said, though. What I understood was not what she meant. I understood that this Thanksgiving was being turned into a business networking event, and that my big news would now be shared in a room full of industry executives who had direct stakes in my company's future. There was a long pause before my mother continued. Genevieve, your father and I have been thinking with these particular guests. She trailed off, uncharacteristically uncertain. What is it, Mother? Well, darling, we think perhaps this year might be difficult for you. These are very important connections for your father and Thomas. Given your startup situation, we thought you might not be quite ready to navigate these particular social waters. My blood ran cold. Not ready. What exactly does that mean? Oh, you know what these business dinners can be like, Eleanor continued, her voice falsely bright. All that talk of market shares and quarterly earnings. We wouldn't want you to feel out of place. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with an incoming text from my mother, even as we were speaking. I put the call on speaker and opened the message. Genevieve, considering our guests this year, your father and I think it would be best if you joined us for Christmas instead. The Thanksgiving table will be full of industry talk that might make you uncomfortable. We don't think you're quite ready for that level yet. We only want to protect you from feeling out of place. Love, Mother. I stared at the phone, understanding washing over me like ice water. They were uninviting me from Thanksgiving. Their own daughter, because they didn't think I was successful enough to sit at a table with their important business guests. Genevieve, are you still there? My mother asked through the phone. I got your text, I said. my voice eerily calm despite the storm raging inside me. "Oh, good. So you understand." "Perfectly," I replied. "You don't want your embarrassing dropout daughter ruining your business dinner." "Now, Genevieve," she said, switching to her scolding tone, "there's no need to be dramatic. This is simply a practical consideration." I ended the call without responding further. Diana found me an hour later, still sitting on my couch, staring at the text. "Those absolute snakes," she hissed after reading it. "After everything, they still think you're some kind of amateur playing business." "It's worse than that," I said, my voice hollow. "They know exactly who will be at that table. People from Tech Giant and Novatech. People who are involved in our deal." Diana connected the dots immediately. "They don't want you there because they think you'll embarrass them in front of important business connections. They have no idea that you're about to announce the biggest tech acquisition of the year to the very people they're trying to impress." The irony was almost too perfect. All these years of being the family's disappointment, and just as I was about to prove them wrong in the most dramatic fashion possible, they prevented me from attending. "You should go anyway," Diana urged. "Just show up and drop your news. Imagine their faces." The thought was tempting, but something in me resisted. "I think I need to let this play out differently." "What are you going to do?" Diana asked. "I'm going to respect their wishes," I said, a plan forming in my mind. "I'm not ready for their Thanksgiving table." "Fine, I'll just have to show them what I'm ready for." After the devastating text from my mother, I made a decision that surprised even me. I would not fight for my place at the Thanksgiving table. I would not create a scene by showing up uninvited. I would not call my siblings to complain or send angry texts to my parents. Instead, I would simply accept their assessment and stay away. "What are you really going to do on Thanksgiving?" Diana asked, concerned about leaving me alone for the holiday. She was flying to Portland the next morning to spend the weekend with her own family. "I'm going to work," I said simply. "We still have details to finalize with Tech Giant anyway." "That's the most depressing thing I've ever heard," Diana replied. "Working through Thanksgiving because your family thinks you're not good enough to sit at their table." I shrugged, trying to appear more nonchalant than I felt. "My family made their choice. I'm making mine." After Diana left the next morning, our apartment felt eerily quiet. I tried to focus on work, reviewing the final contract points for the Tech Giant acquisition, but my mother's text kept intruding on my thoughts. "Not ready." Those two simple words carried the weight of years of dismissal, years of never quite measuring up to the Carter family standard. By Thanksgiving morning, I had thrown myself completely into work mode. I answered emails, finalized presentation details for our post-acquisition announcement, and tried to ignore the steady stream of social media posts showing happy families gathering together. Around noon, my phone buzzed with a text from Thomas. "Happy Thanksgiving, General. Sorry you're not here. Mom's gone all out as usual." Attached was a photo of the dining room, already set with the fine china and crystal that my mother reserved for her most important events. I noticed the table was arranged for 16 people. 16 people who were deemed ready for the Carter family Thanksgiving. 16 people who didn't include me. I sent back a simple, "Thanks, happy Thanksgiving to you too," and returned to my laptop. By 3 o'clock, the apartment began to fill with the pitiful aroma of my Thanksgiving dinner, a microwave turkey meal with instant mashed potatoes. As I was setting it on my coffee table, my phone rang. It was James. "Jen, great news," he exclaimed, without preamble. "Marshall just called me. They want to sign the papers tomorrow morning, instead of waiting until Monday. They love the final terms." My heart leaped. Really? What changed? Apparently, their board met this morning and gave final approval. They want to announce before the markets open on Monday. This is happening, General. This is really happening. After ending the call, I abandoned my sad microwave dinner and dove back into work. If we were signing tomorrow, there were a dozen details that needed immediate attention. For the next few hours, I lost myself in contract reviews and press release drafts, barely noticing as the afternoon faded into evening. Around 7 o'clock, my phone buzzed again. It was Allison sending a group text to the family. Dinner is amazing as always. Mom-Dad is in rare form with his stories. Attached was a photo of the dining table, now filled with guests in formal attire, crystal glasses filled with wine, and my mother beaming at the head of the table. I zoomed in, studying the faces of the guests. There was Richard Marshall from Tech Giant, seated next to my father. Across from him was Victoria Peterson from Novatech. I recognized several other tech industry executives mixed in with family members. These were the people my parents thought I wasn't ready to meet. These were the people who, unknown to my family, had been in negotiations with my little startup for weeks. I set my phone down and walked to the window of my apartment. The Seattle skyline glittered in the distance lights from office buildings, creating a constellation of human ambition. Somewhere in that landscape was the Tech Giant headquarters, where tomorrow morning I would sign papers that would change my life forever. Another text came through, this time from Thomas. You would have been bored anyway. All business talk and Dad's bragging. Marshall from Tech Giant is here talking about some big acquisition they're making. Dad keeps trying to get details. The irony was almost too perfect. My father was fishing for information about a deal that his uninvited daughter was at the center of. I didn't respond. As the evening progressed, my social media feeds filled with Thanksgiving posts. Friends with their families, colleagues with their children, everyone connected to someone. The apartment felt colder than ever. Around 9, I received another text from my mother. Dinner was lovely, darling. Everyone was so impressive. Richard Marshall mentioned a major acquisition announcement on Monday. Your father is hoping Thomas might be considered to handle some of the legal aspects. Next year, when you've established yourself a bit more, you'll be ready for these connections. I stared at the text, a complex mix of emotions washing over me. Anger, certainly. Hurt, definitely. But also a strange sense of anticipation. My mother had no idea that the acquisition Richard Marshall mentioned was my company. She had no idea that her uninvited daughter was the reason for the excitement. She had no idea what was coming. I turned off my phone without replying and went to bed early, setting my alarm for 6. Tomorrow would be a big day, bigger than any of my family members could possibly imagine. My phone began buzzing at 5:47 a.m., 13 minutes before my alarm was set to go off. Half asleep, I fumbled to silence it, assuming it was the wake-up call. Instead, I found 17 missed calls, 34 text messages, and over 50 email notifications. Still groggy, I opened the first text. It was from James. Jen, wake up, call me, immediately. They broke the story early. Suddenly fully alert, I sat up and began scrolling through the messages. There were texts from college friends I hadn't heard from in years, former colleagues, even a few venture capitalists who had previously declined to invest in Neurotech. All contained variations of the same message. Congratulations on the acquisition. I jumped out of bed and called James. What happened? I demanded when he answered. Tech Giant issued the press release 4 hours ago. James shouted, his voice a mix of panic and excitement. It went out on the newswires at 2 a.m. our time. I just woke up to the news myself. They must have decided to announce before the Asian markets opened. Jen, it's everywhere. I rushed to my laptop, still trying to process what James was saying. We were supposed to sign the papers this morning and make a joint announcement next week. Something had changed. As my browser loaded, the reality began to sink in. The top headline on every tech news site told the same story: tech giant acquires Neurotech for record-breaking $2.7 billion. The largest AI analytics acquisition in tech history. My hands shaking, I turned on the television and flipped to the business news channel. There on the screen was a professional photo of me alongside the tech giant CEO, with the headline scrolling beneath: Breaking Tech Giant Announces Major Acquisition of Seattle Startup Neurotech. What are we supposed to do now? I asked James, my eyes fixed on the surreal image of my face on national television. We haven't even signed the papers yet. Their legal team called me 15 minutes ago, James replied. The papers are being sent over by courier. Apparently, their board decided to accelerate everything after yesterday's meeting. The CEO wants to do a joint press conference at 10. My phone continued to buzz with incoming messages. I noticed one from Diana. "Oh my God, Jen. You're on every news channel. Call me." And then, as if on cue, a notification from my banking app appeared. The first installment of the acquisition payment had been deposited. I stared at the number, struggling to comprehend the string of zeros. I was now officially a multi-millionaire. The next hours passed in a blur. I showered and dressed in the nicest clothes I owned, knowing cameras would be capturing this day. The courier arrived with documents, which I signed with James on a video call, our attorneys present virtually. Press requests poured in faster than we could process them. By 9 o'clock, 3 hours after I'd woken to the news, I still hadn't heard from my family. Not a single text call or email. They had to have seen the news by now. Richard Marshall, who had been at their Thanksgiving table just hours earlier, was quoted extensively in the press release. At 9:30, my building doorman called up. "Miss Carter, there's a news crew in the lobby requesting an interview. Shall I send them up?" Normally, I would have declined, preferring to stick to the official press conference scheduled with tech giant. But a sudden inspiration struck me. "Yes, please, send them up." 10 minutes later, I was doing my first live television interview as the CEO of a company that had just made tech industry history. The reporter, clearly excited to have scored this exclusive, wasted no time getting to the dramatic questions. "Genevieve, this acquisition has taken the tech world by storm. The timing is particularly interesting, coming right after Thanksgiving. Were you celebrating last night when you got the news?" I paused, considering how to respond. The truth was too perfect not to share. "Actually, I spent Thanksgiving alone in my apartment," I said, with a smile that belied the pain of the memory. My family had a gathering with some important business guests, including executives from tech giant. They decided I wasn't quite ready to join them at the table this year. The reporter's eyes widened. Not ready. The woman who just negotiated the largest AI analytics acquisition in history. I nodded, maintaining my composure. Sometimes the people closest to you are the last to recognize your potential. The interview continued, covering the technical aspects of our software and the future plans under tech giant. But I could tell the human interest angle of my Thanksgiving exclusion had struck a chord. As the crew was packing up, the reporter couldn't resist one final question. "Will you be calling your family after this interview?" "They know where to find me," I replied simply. After the news crew left, I checked my phone again. Among the hundreds of new notifications, I finally saw a text from Thomas sent 20 minutes earlier. "Jen, did I just see you on CNBC? Is this for real? The tech giant acquisition is your company." Before I could respond, another text came through, this one from Allison. Genevieve, call me immediately. Mom and Dad are freaking out. Is this really happening? I set my phone aside without replying and prepared for the official press conference with tech giant. This moment belonged to me and the team who had believed in our vision. My family would have to wait. The press conference was a triumph. Standing alongside the tech giant CEO, I outlined our technology and shared our vision for integration. Business reporters asked insightful questions about the platform, the valuation, and our growth trajectory. I answered each with confidence, years of technical knowledge flowing naturally. This was my world, and for once, I was being recognized as an expert in it. Throughout the day, the news cycle continued to amplify our story, with one particular angle gaining traction: the young female founder who revolutionized AI analytics while being underestimated at every turn. My comment about spending Thanksgiving alone had resonated, sparking a broader conversation about women in tech. By evening, my story had evolved from a simple business acquisition to something more powerful. Social media was ablaze with the hashtag #ReadyForTheTable as women in technology shared their own experiences of being underestimated. At 7 p.m., exhausted but exhilarated, I returned to my apartment to find it filled with flowers. Diana had arranged delivery of dozens of arrangements, each with a card that read simply, "Congratulations on being more than ready." As I sank onto my couch, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was my father. After a full day of silence, he had finally decided to reach out. "Genevieve, your mother and I are very surprised by today's news. We would like to discuss this development with you. Please call us when you have a moment." No congratulations, no acknowledgement of the achievement, just surprise and a request for discussion, as if I had created a problem to be solved rather than built a company valuable enough to command billions. I set the phone down without replying and opened my laptop. There were hundreds of emails to answer, interviews to schedule, and a new future to plan. My family would have to wait their turn, just as they had made me wait for my place at their table. The next morning, I arrived at our company headquarters early. We had moved into the space just 6 months ago, a modest office in a mid-tier building with views of Elliott Bay. It wasn't the gleaming glass tower of my father's bank, but it was ours, at least for now. Soon we would be relocating to the tech giant campus, with all the perks and prestige that came with being part of a tech giant. James met me in the lobby, his usual rumpled appearance, upgraded with what appeared to be a new shirt. "Ready for day 2 of being tech royalty?" he asked with a grin. I laughed, the first genuine laugh since the Thanksgiving text from my mother. Just trying to keep up with the emails. I've never been so popular. We had just stepped into the elevator when my phone buzzed. It was a message from our receptionist, Madison. "Miss Carter, your family is in the lobby. All of them. Should I send them up?" I stared at the message, my momentary good mood evaporating. My family, here, without calling ahead or receiving an invitation, just appearing as if they had the right to insert themselves into this moment. James noticed my expression. "What is it?" "My family is downstairs." "The Carter cavalry has arrived," he said with a grimace. "Want me to tell them you're in meetings all day?" I considered it. The thought of avoiding this confrontation was tempting. But sooner or later this moment would come. Better to face it on my terms, in my territory. "Send them up," I texted back to Madison. "But give me 10 minutes. When the elevator doors opened on our floor, I went straight to my office, James following close behind. "Want me to stay?" he offered, his loyalty evident. "No, I need to handle this myself. But maybe hover nearby." James nodded, understanding perfectly. "I'll be in the conference room next door. Text if you need extraction. I took a moment to gather myself, straightening my desk and smoothing my hair. Then I sat in my chair, opened my laptop, and pretended to be engrossed in work. Let them find me busy, successful, unconcerned with their sudden appearance. 8 minutes later, there was a knock at my door, followed by Madison's voice. "Miss Carter, your family is here to see you." I looked up to see all 4 of them crowded in my doorway. My father Jackson, in his tailored suit and patrician posture. My mother Eleanor perfectly coiffed, even in what was clearly an emergency family intervention. Allison looking uncomfortable in scrubs, apparently, having come straight from the hospital, and Thomas, his lawyers, face a mask of professional neutrality. "Thank you, Madison," I said calmly. "Please bring coffee for everyone." My family filed in silently, taking in the modest office, with varying expressions of surprise. I had never invited them here before, and they had never asked to visit. "You can sit," I said, gesturing to the chairs across from my desk. No one moved immediately. My father was staring at the wall behind me, where I had hung the framed cover of Technology Today featuring our software. My mother was examining my simple office furniture with barely concealed disapproval. Allison and Thomas exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable. Finally, my father broke the silence. "Genevieve," he began, his voice carrying that particular tone of authority he used when beginning important pronouncements. "This is quite a surprise." "Is it?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "I've been building this company for 4 years. "Yes. Well," he continued, obviously, thrown by my calm response. "We had no idea it had progressed to this level of significance." My mother stepped forward, her social smile firmly in place. "Darling, what your father means is that we're all so proud of this unexpected achievement. If Wed had any idea that your little startup was being acquired by tech giant, well, naturally you'd have been included in Thanksgiving." There it was, the first attempt at rewriting history. "My little startup," I repeated. "The one that just sold for $2.7 billion. The number hung in the air between us. Allison audibly gasped, apparently unaware of the exact figure until this moment. "Yes? Well, quite impressive," my father said, visibly struggling to maintain his composure. "The Carter entrepreneurial genes clearly expressed themselves in you after all." I stared at him, momentarily speechless at this blatant attempt to claim credit. Before I could respond, Thomas stepped forward. "What father means," he said, his lawyer voice in full effect, "is that we're all very impressed and want to understand more about this deal. Richard Marshall was at Thanksgiving dinner, and he never mentioned that Neurotech was your company." My mother nodded eagerly. "Yes, that's right. Richard spoke about a major acquisition, but he never said it was you. If we'd known." "If you'd known," I interrupted, "then it'd have been ready for your table." An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Madison arrived with coffee, setting the tray on my desk before quietly withdrawing. No one reached for a cup. Genevieve, my mother, finally said, "There's no need to be difficult. We simply didn't realize the extent of your company's success." "I think what Genevieve is trying to say," Allison interjected, speaking for the first time, "is that she feels hurt by being excluded from Thanksgiving, especially given what was happening with her company." I shot Allison a grateful look. At least one family member was attempting to acknowledge the reality of the situation. "Exactly," I said. "You decided I wasn't ready to sit at a table with Richard Marshall, when in fact I was the reason he was there in the first place." My father frowned, clearly uncomfortable with this direct confrontation. "The past is the past, Genevieve. What matters now is how we move forward as a family. Your success reflects well on all of us, and we should discuss how to manage this new development." "Manage it?" I asked, unable to keep the edge from my voice. Your father simply means, my mother interjected smoothly, that this changes things for all of us. The family profile is enhanced by your achievement. I stood up slowly, placing my palms flat on the desk. For 27 years, I've been the family disappointment. The computer geek who dropped out of college to play entrepreneur. I've been excluded, dismissed, and most recently uninvited from the family Thanksgiving because I wasn't ready for your important guests. Genevieve, that's not fair, my mother protested weakly. I held up my hand, stopping her. Just yesterday, I became one of the most successful tech entrepreneurs under 30 in the country. I didn't achieve that because of the Carter name or connections. I did it despite being told repeatedly by my own family that I would fail. My father shifted uncomfortably. No one is denying your accomplishment, Genevieve. We're simply here to reconcile as a family now that circumstances have changed. Circumstances, I repeated. You mean now that I'm rich and successful by even your standards. An uncomfortable silence fell over the office. Through the glass wall, I could see James hovering nearby, keeping a watchful eye on the situation. Thomas cleared his throat. Jen, we all know we haven't been as supportive as we could have been, but we're here now. We're trying. Something in his tone, a genuine note of regret, softened my anger slightly. Thomas, at least, seemed to recognize the reality of what had happened. I took a deep breath. I appreciate you all coming, I said, my voice more measured. But I have a company to run and a transition to manage. This isn't the time for a family reunion, especially one that feels more about damage control than genuine reconciliation. Damage control, my father repeated, his face flushing. What exactly do you mean by that? I mean that you ignored me until I became too successful to ignore, I replied simply. And now you're here, not because you're proud of me, but because you're worried about how it looks that you excluded me from Thanksgiving the day before my company made national news. My mother gasped. Genevieve, that is a horrible thing to say to your parents. Is it? I asked. More horrible than telling your daughter she isn't ready to sit at the family table. No one had an immediate response to that. For perhaps the first time in my life, I had rendered both my parents speechless. Allison stepped forward, her expression softer than the others. Jen, I know we haven't always been there for you the way we should have been. I can't speak for Mom and Dad, but I can say I'm sorry and am truly proud of what you've accomplished. Her words, unexpected and seemingly genuine, caught me off guard. Before I could respond, my father interjected. We should discuss how this affects the family moving forward, he said, clearly eager to change the subject. There are tax considerations, investment opportunities within the family portfolio. Of course, I thought. Even now he was thinking about how my success could benefit him. Dad, Thomas said, sharply, surprising all of us with his tone. Maybe this isn't the time for financial planning. Maybe we should just congratulate Genevieve and ask how we can support her. My father looked startled at being contradicted by his usually compliant son. Well, yes, of course. Congratulations, Genevieve. Now about the family implications. I had reached my limit. Thank you all for coming, I said, standing up straight and smoothing my skirt. But as I mentioned, I have a company to run. Perhaps we can continue this conversation another time. You're dismissing us, my mother asked, incredulous. I'm postponing a conversation that isn't productive right now, I corrected. I'm happy to meet when emotions aren't so high and we can talk honestly about how we move forward. My father stood abruptly. Very well. When you're ready to discuss this rationally, you know how to reach us. I watched silently as he guided my mother toward the door. Allison hesitated, then stepped forward, to give me a quick, awkward hug. "I'm really proud of you, Jen," she whispered, "and I'm sorry." Thomas lingered after our parents had exited. "I'm sorry too," he said simply. "They mean well in their own way." "Do they?" I asked, genuinely curious about his perspective. He sighed. "They only know one way to be successful. You created a different path, and that scares them. But what you've done is incredible, and I hope you know that at least some of us recognize that." With that, he followed our parents out, leaving me alone in my office, surrounded by the trappings of a success that had come despite not because of my family. In the weeks following the acquisition announcement and my family's impromptu office visit, I experienced a profound shift in both my professional and personal worlds. Tech Giant moved quickly to integrate our team, offering us prime office space on their Seattle campus and resources beyond what we could have imagined as an independent startup. James and I found ourselves in leadership positions within the larger organization, our expertise suddenly valued at the highest levels of the tech world. More jarring than the professional changes, however, was the transformation in how people related to me personally. Former classmates who had ignored my messages for years suddenly appeared in my inbox, eager to reconnect. Distant relatives reached out with warm congratulations and business propositions. Invitations to exclusive events filled my calendar, my name now appearing on lists previously reserved for established tech luminaries. And then there was my family. 3 days after their office visit, my mother texted me with an invitation to lunch at her exclusive social club. I declined, citing work commitments. My father emailed a detailed proposal for managing my new wealth, complete with introductions to the family's financial advisors. I replied with a polite thank you and mentioned I had already engaged my own team. Allison continued to send occasional messages of support, which felt more genuine than the others. Thomas invited me to coffee, an offer I eventually accepted after postponing twice. We met at a quiet cafe near the Tech Giant campus, away from the society spots my family typically frequented. "You look different," Thomas observed as he stirred his cappuccino. "New haircut," I replied, touching my recently styled bob. He shook his head. "It's not that. You carry yourself differently, more confident." $2.7 billion will do that for a girl, I said dryly. Thomas laughed, a genuine sound that reminded me of rarer, lighter moments from our childhood. "You always had that sharp wit. I just never appreciated it enough." We sat in companionable silence for a moment before he broached the real subject of our meeting. "Mom and Dad want to host a family dinner next week," he said carefully, "to celebrate your success." I raised an eyebrow. "Just family?" "Well, and the Hansons. And possibly the Richardsons." I recognized the names of 2 prominent Seattle families, both with significant business interests. So not really a family dinner at all. Thomas had the grace to look embarrassed. "You know how they are. Everything is a networking opportunity." "Including their suddenly successful daughter," I observed. He did deny it. "Will you come?" I considered the invitation, weighing my desire to maintain boundaries against the reality that I couldn't avoid my family forever. Do they understand why what they did was hurtful? Thomas sighed. "They're trying, General, in their own way. Dad has mentioned your acquisition at least a dozen times at his club. Mom is telling everyone how she always knew you had special potential." "But they still don't get it," I said, not really a question. "Probably not entirely," he admitted. "But does that mean you can't have any relationship with them?" His question hung in the air, between us, challenging me to consider what kind of future I wanted with my family. Did I want to maintain the rift, holding on to the justified anger of years of dismissal? Or Was there a way forward that acknowledged the past while creating something new? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was Diana reminding me about our company's holiday party planning meeting. The event would be our first major social function since the acquisition, and the guest list was proving contentious. I'll think about the dinner I promised Thomas as we parted ways. But no promises. Later that day, during the planning meeting, James raised a question that brought my family situation into sharper focus. "Should we invite immediate family members?" he asked, reviewing the draft guest list. "Several team members have parents or siblings who want to attend." The questions sparked an immediate debate among our team, with opinions divided on whether family members would enhance or complicate the professional celebration. As the discussion continued, I found my thoughts drifting to my own family. Would inviting them be a gesture of reconciliation or an invitation to further tension? "What's your take?" James finally asked, bringing me back to the present. All eyes turned to me, waiting for guidance. In that moment, I realized that how I handled my own family's situation would set a precedent for our company culture moving forward. "Family is complicated," I said carefully. "For some of us, having family present would be supportive and affirming. For others, it might create tension or discomfort. I suggest we leave it to each individual to decide who represents family to them and whether they want those people present." The team nodded in agreement, and we moved forward with planning that allowed for personal discretion. But the question remained unresolved in my own mind. What did I want my relationship with my family to be, now that the power dynamic had shifted so dramatically? That evening, I scheduled a session with Dr. Patterson, a therapist I had been seeing sporadically since the early days of my company. She had helped me navigate the complex emotions surrounding my family's dismissal of my career path, and I hoped she could provide clarity now that circumstances had changed so radically. "So your family now wants to include you in events, even showcase you, after years of treating you as the family disappointment," Dr. Patterson summarized after I had explained the situation. "Exactly. And I don't know how to respond. Part of me wants to exclude them the way they excluded me, to make them feel what I felt. But another part wonders if that's just perpetuating the cycle." She nodded thoughtfully. "What would a healthy relationship with your family look like to you now? Not what it was before, not what they might want it to be, but what would serve your well-being?" The question caught me off guard. I had been so focused on reacting to my family's sudden interest that I hadn't considered proactively defining what I wanted. I began slowly. I think I want a relationship where my boundaries are respected, where my achievements aren't dismissed or suddenly claimed as family accomplishments, where I can be myself without constant judgment. "And do you believe your family is capable of providing that kind of relationship?" I considered the question seriously. "Not without clear boundaries," I admitted. "They don't know how to relate to me as an equal. They only know how to look down on me, or now how to use my success for their benefit." So perhaps the question isn't whether to allow them back into your life. Dr. Patterson suggested, but on what terms? Her words resonated deeply. The issue wasn't about inclusion or exclusion, but about establishing a new foundation for our relationship, one based on mutual respect, rather than hierarchical family dynamics. Armed with this clarity, I texted Thomas the next day, suggesting an alternative to our parents' proposed dinner. I would meet with my parents, but at a neutral location, a private dining room at a downtown restaurant rather than the family home. And it would be just the four of us without additional guests or networking opportunities. My mother replied almost immediately, clearly dismayed by my counter-proposal. "Darling, the Hansons were so looking forward to meeting you. Can't we include just a few close family friends? I held firm. This needs to be a family conversation, not a social event. Eventually, they agreed, though not without further attempts to expand the guest list. The evening of our dinner arrived, and I selected my outfit carefully, simple but expensive, projecting confidence without ostentation. I arrived exactly on time to find my parents already seated in the private dining room. Genevieve, my mother greeted me, rising for air kisses. You look lovely. My father stood as well, offering a formal handshake. Thank you for suggesting this dinner. We have much to discuss. The meal began with tense small talk about the weather and recent social events. My mother detailed her charity commitments, while my father discussed market trends, as though providing valuable insights I couldn't access elsewhere. It was their usual routine, establishing their importance, but now tinged with a new awareness of my changed status. Finally, as the main course was served, I steered the conversation to its real purpose. I want to discuss our relationship moving forward, I said directly. My parents exchanged glances. Of course, darling, my mother said smoothly. We're so looking forward to including you in more family events now that your schedule allows. I took a deep breath. That's not what I mean. I want to talk about the patterns that have defined our relationship and what needs to change if we're going to have a healthy connection. My father's brow furrowed. I'm not sure I follow, Genevieve. If you're still upset about Thanksgiving, your mother has explained that it was a simple misunderstanding. It wasn't a misunderstanding, I said firmly. It was the culmination of years of being dismissed and undervalued. And while my financial situation has changed, I'm not interested in a relationship where I'm only valued for my success or what I can provide to the family. My mother looked genuinely startled. Surely you don't think that's how we see you. Isn't it? I asked. When have you ever valued my choices or achievements before they came with $1 billion price tag? A heavy silence fell over the table. For perhaps the first time, my parents seemed to recognize that the dynamic had fundamentally changed. I was no longer the daughter seeking approval, but an adult setting terms for our relationship. What exactly are you asking for? My father finally said, his voice uncharacteristically uncertain. I'm asking for respect, I replied simply. For acknowledgement of the past without trying to rewrite it. For a relationship based on who I actually am, not who you wanted me to be, or who you now think you can benefit from. My parents exchanged another look. A silent communication developed over decades of marriage. We may not have always understood your choices, my father said carefully, but we have always wanted what was best for you. According to your definition of best, I replied, not mine. Another silence, longer this time. Perhaps my mother finally said we could try to understand your definition better. It wasn't an apology or even a full acknowledgement of past wrongs, but it was perhaps a first tentative step toward a new kind of relationship. I'd like that, I said, feeling some of the tension release from my shoulders. As the dinner concluded, we made no specific plans for future gatherings. There were no promises of immediate change or dramatic reconciliation. Instead, there was a quiet understanding that our relationship had entered new territory, undefined, but potentially healthier than what had come before. As I drove home that night, I realized that true power wasn't about forcing others to admit their wrongs or exacting revenge for past hurts. It was about defining my own boundaries and deciding on my own terms what relationships were worth investing in and how they should function. The family dynamic had shifted, yes, but more importantly, I had shifted. And that more than any acquisition or financial success was the real transformation. 6 months after the tech giant acquisition, spring had returned to Seattle, bringing cherry blossoms and a gentle renewal to the city. My life had settled into a new rhythm, balancing my leadership role at Tech Giant with a growing public presence as a spokesperson for women in technology. The company continued to thrive under the larger corporate umbrella, our Insight engine becoming one of Tech Giant's most successful products. My apartment had been replaced by a modern home overlooking Lake Washington, spacious enough for entertaining but still reflecting my personal aesthetic rather than the ostentatious grandeur of my parents' estate. The walls were adorned with art from emerging local artists rather than the ancestral portraits that dominated my childhood home. Diana had moved into her own place, but remained a constant presence in my life, now heading our original team's research division at Tech Giant. James had recently gotten engaged, his newfound financial security, allowing him to propose to his longtime girlfriend with a ring he had been saving for over 3 years. As for my family, we had established a tentative new normal. The relationship remained complicated, marked by occasional tensions, but also by genuine efforts toward mutual understanding. My parents had not immediately transformed, but small changes suggested an evolving awareness of past mistakes. Most significantly, I had reclaimed Thanksgiving. This year, the holiday would be celebrated at my home, on my terms, with guests of my choosing. The invitation list included my core team from Neuratech close friends like Diana, and yes, my family members who chose to attend under the new parameters I had established. The morning of Thanksgiving, I stood in my kitchen, preparing coffee when my phone rang. It was my cousin Zoe, my Uncle Robert's daughter, who was 10 years younger than me. At 19, she was in her sophomore year at Washington State, studying computer science. "Jen, is it still okay if I bring my roommate?" she asked, sounding uncharacteristically nervous. Her parents would love a home-cooked meal, but they live in Portland, and she can't afford the train ticket home for such a short break. "Of course," I assured her. "The more the merrier." "Thanks," Zoe said, then hesitated. "Can I ask you something else?" "Anything." "How did you do it? Keep going when everyone thought you were making a mistake." My dad called last night and went on this long rant about how I'm wasting my potential in computer science when I could be in pre-med or pre-law. I felt a pang of recognition so sharp it nearly took my breath away. The patterns continued generation after generation. "Bring your roommate and come a few hours early," I suggested. "I think we have a lot to talk about." Later that afternoon, Zoe arrived with her roommate, Tamika. While Diana entertained Tamika with stories of our early startup days, I took Zoe to my home office, a bright space overlooking the lake. "Your dad thinks you're making a mistake with computer science," I asked, once we were settled with tea. Zoe nodded miserably. "He keeps saying there's no future in it for women, that'll hit a glass ceiling. He wants me to transfer to pre-med next semester." I smiled ruefully. Some things never change. "How did you deal with it? Everyone thinking you were throwing your life away." I considered her question carefully, wanting to offer genuine wisdom rather than simple platitudes. "I wish I could say I was always confident, that I never doubted myself when faced with their disapproval," I admitted. "But the truth is, it was hard. There were nights I cried myself to sleep, wondering if they were right, if I was just being stubborn or naive." Zoe nodded her expression, suggesting she'd experienced similar doubts. "What kept me going," I continued, "was believing in the work itself. I loved what I was building. Even when investors rejected us, even when my parents dismissed me, the actual work felt right. That's what you have to connect with, the joy in the creation itself, not just the potential outcome or others' approval." We talked for over an hour, covering everything from specific coursework to navigating male-dominated tech spaces. By the time we rejoined the others, Zoe stood a little straighter, her eyes clearer. As guests began to arrive, I watched the interesting social dynamics unfold in my home. James and his fiancée chatted amicably with Thomas, finding common ground in legal aspects of tech acquisitions. Diana engaged my mother in conversation about art, an interest they surprisingly shared. My father examined my view with appreciation, making comments about property values that I chose to interpret as his version of compliments. The most striking moment came when one of our junior developers, a brilliant young woman, mentored through a Women in Tech program, enthusiastically explained her latest project to my father. To my surprise, he listened attentively, asking relevant questions that showed genuine interest. "You've built quite a community," Allison observed, joining me at the window as I watched the interactions. "I tried to create what I needed when I was starting out," I replied. "Support, mentorship, genuine belief in potential." She nodded thoughtfully. "I wish it'd been more of that for you." Her simple acknowledgement, free from excuses or justifications, touched me deeply. "Better late than never," I said, meaning it. As we gathered around the table, I surveyed the eclectic group. My biological family was present, yes, but so was my chosen family, those who had believed in me when belief was scarce, who had supported my vision when others could not see it. "I think about that text sometimes," I admitted to Diana later, after most guests had departed and we were cleaning up the kitchen. "The one saying I wasn't ready for the family table." Diana snorted. "The universe has a twisted sense of humor." I nodded, placing the last wine glass in the dishwasher. The rejection that seemed so devastating at the time had become a pivotal moment in my story, the low point that preceded the triumphant rise. Had I sat at that Thanksgiving table last year, surrounded by family who underestimated me and business associates who didn't know me, would I have found the strength to stand firmly in my own worth when success came? A week after Thanksgiving, my mother called with the annual Christmas invitation. The Carter family Christmas was even more elaborate than Thanksgiving, with distant relatives arriving from around the country and my mother's social circle expanding to fill every corner of the estate. "We're so hoping you'll join us this year, Genevieve," she said, her voice carrying the practiced warmth she used for important social requests. "Everyone is so eager to see you, especially after your lovely Thanksgiving gathering." I considered the invitation, weighing the genuine progress made against the knowledge that old patterns remained deeply ingrained. My presence at their Christmas celebration would still be at least partly about what I represented rather than who I was. "Actually, I have other plans this year," I said gently. "I'm volunteering with Girls Code, helping run their holiday hackathon for underserved teens." "Oh," my mother replied, unable to fully hide her disappointment. "Well, that sounds very worthwhile. Perhaps you could stop by in the evening." The old me would have acquiesced, prioritizing family obligation over personal boundaries. The new me recognized the importance of making choices aligned with my values. "Not this year," I said firmly. "But let's plan a private lunch in January, just the two of us." After ending the call, I felt a quiet satisfaction that had nothing to do with professional achievements or financial success. The true measure of my growth wasn't in the acquisition numbers or the industry recognition, but in my ability to define my worth independently of external validation. The journey from that painful Thanksgiving rejection to today had taught me that true success isn't measured by who welcomes you to their table, but by your courage to build your own table and fill it with those who genuinely celebrate your authentic self. As I look toward the future, I realized that the most valuable outcome of my success wasn't the money or status, but the freedom to live according to my own definition of what matters. The freedom to choose which relationships to nurture, which traditions to honor, and which new paths to forge. Have you ever had to prove your worth to people who should have believed in you from the start? How did you handle that journey, and what did you learn about yourself along the way? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if this resonated with you. Remember, sometimes the people who don't make space for you at their table are unknowingly giving you the push you need to build something greater than they could imagine. Thank you for listening, and may you always find the courage to define success on your own terms.